I am welcoming you again to our Information System Project Management course. I'm expecting the Bachelor of Library and Information Science Year 3 students to attend this online course. Now, we have looked at several topics, an introductory topic, then there is that topic number 2, which looks at the system development life cycle models and approaches. We have the traditional approach, we have the structured approach. We have also looked at topic number 3, which looks at the information system project life cycle. The information system project life cycle. And we've also looked at what we call the project life cycle process groups, or the project life cycle phases. And one of these process groups is the so-called project planning process group, or project planning phase. Now, basically, this topic number 4 looks at the project planning phase. The project planning phase is where the project manager develops the project plan. Now, in the project plan document, we expect to see a number of different documents. Different documents are incorporated within one document, the so-called project plan document. And within this project plan document, we expect to look at a number of issues, one of them being the project organization, how the project is going to be organized, how the project is going to be structured. We look at the technical processes that we are going to follow as project managers. We look at the different various work packages that we are going to handle. We look at the project budget. We look at the resource plan. We must have a resource plan that looks or that highlights all the different resources that we are going to use in our project. And most important of all, we need to have what we call the project schedule plan, a schedule of different project activities. That plan has to be there, indicating the project schedule plan. Well, colleagues, in this slide we are looking at the project schedule planning, or the project schedule plan. During project schedule planning, this is of course the job of the project manager, there are particular things that we have to do. One of them, refining the project objectives so that they fit our intended plan. Because earlier we may have defined the high-level project objectives. Now when we are coming up with a schedule plan, we must refine those objectives so that they fit our plan which we are developing. Now, we not only refine these objectives, but we also develop the resource plan. We develop the project resource plan. And then we also set the project milestones. And we also set the project high-level deliverables. And actually, when we talk about schedule planning, we, as project managers, determine the project team that we are going to work with. Who is going to do what? Are you going to be the information and communication librarian, the information and communication project librarian? Are you going to be the procurement officer within our project, and so on and so forth? So we determine the project team. And we also think through the scope of work. We think through the scope of work, and the scope of work means the activities, all the activities, the sum total of all activities that we are going to perform. We think through them and see what ought to be performed and what we may leave. So we also, during schedule planning, we plan the milestones. Sometimes you may use what we call a milestone schedule. I want you to read about this. A milestone schedule can assist you to plan your milestones. A milestone is something that is an indication to a deliverable something that indicates that we are about to reach there. That's what we call a milestone. We also determine the technical requirements. We come up with what we call request for proposal, RFP. We also think about how we are going to control our change in scope. This is what we call scope change control. We are going to see how each and every cost is going to be estimated. In our topic number 5, cost management is one of the project management areas of knowledge. And in cost management, they show us how costs can be well managed. So in schedule planning, we also should not forget to think about the costs of everything, and we also must be knowledgeable in the different cost estimation techniques that we shall look at in our topic number 5 when we are looking at that cost management area, which is one of the project management areas of knowledge. So we must know how to handle these costs. We must estimate the time during schedule planning. We must also estimate the risks. So basically, in schedule planning, there is a lot of work that the project manager has to do. In project schedule planning, we also determine the project team. These are the members of the team who are going to work directly on the project. We include sometimes the project information and the communication librarian. We include the project procurement officer, the project analyst, the members who are going to do the coding of the software, and so on and so forth. Now, in project schedule planning, we determine members of that team. In project schedule planning, we also think through the scope of work. The scope of work is a sum total of all activities that we intend to work on in the project. So we think through the scope of work, and when we are thinking through the scope of work, remember we come up with what we call a scope management plan document. In this document, we bring in everything relating to the project scope. We scope the project stakeholders, we scope the project high-level risks, we scope the project activities that are supposed to be undertaken, and we agree on scope change control. We agree on what should be contained in the scope, and we verify and validate each and everything. This is what we do in scope management. So we come up with a scope management plan document, which is basically required. Now, schedule planning also involves refining the high-level project objectives and project deliverables. So we define them. We also plan the project milestones. A milestone is an indication to a deliverable. So we plan all the project milestones. So a milestone schedule must be indicated in our project plan. We also determine the user requirements. So a user requirements document must be appended on the project planning document. So in the project plan, we must consider not only the project team, we must look at the scope of work together with the scope management plan document attached. We must refine the high-level objectives and deliverables. We must have a milestone schedule. We must also have a user requirements document. In addition to that, we must determine the technical requirements. Sometimes we may have to think about the software that our information system is going to use. We must think about the hardware that we shall need to run our information system. So a technical requirements document is also necessary. We also think through the ideal vendors who are going to supply us with the project resources and logistics that we may need. All these are thought about during the schedule planning process. Now we also think through the scope change control. A scope change control system must be planned. So we also must agree on this scope change control system. Let us now look at the process that we go through to plan our activity schedule. Now, when you are planning your activity schedule, you begin by identifying the different activities that you are to work on in your project. That's what we call activity identification. Now, activity identification is the first thing that we do. We list down the activities, we identify them, and we list them down. So, you identify the activities that you are going to work on in your project, and you must again define each activity. After identification of the activity, you define the activity. That's what we call activity definition. So you define the activity properly and describe what project team members are supposed to do in relation to that particular activity. What we need this activity to achieve, we must consider that, or how this activity contributes to the attainment of our deliverable. Because before we attain a deliverable, there are a number of activities that we undertake. So we define these activities properly. After we've defined each activity properly, then we need to break this activity down. You break down that activity to its atomic level. You break it down to its level where you can break it down no more. Now, that's what we mean by breaking down the activity. And normally, this activity breakdown is graphically represented in what we call a work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure indicates all the activities and how they have all been broken down to their atomic levels. We need therefore to identify each sub-activity within a larger activity. Now, then each one of those sub-activities that we have come up with after activity breakdown have to be sequenced. That's what we call activity sequencing. Activity sequencing is also important. We sequence these activities. In other words, which activity should come first before the other activity comes? Which one should follow the other? Which ones shall we run in parallel with each other? This is what we call activity sequencing. That is also what we sometimes know as activity dependencies, or you may call them task dependencies. We basically have 4 types of dependencies, or you can say task dependencies. Include what we call finish to start dependency. There is also what we call finish to finish dependency. There is start to start dependency, or start to finish dependencies. These are the major types of task dependencies, or call them activity dependencies. I want you to study them and learn them better. Now, there is also another important duty that the project manager has to do. That is to ensure that we come up with an estimation of each and every task, an estimation of the activities. With an estimation of various resources that we shall need to carry out these activities. When we talk about resources, these resources can also be divided into what we call work resources. That's to say, the human resources, or the people who are doing the work, and also the equipment. These are what we categorize as work resources. The human resources who are doing various activities, and the equipment that they use. Those are categorized as work resources. And then there are also what we call material resources. These are the consumables and supplies that we have to do what we're supposed to do. I want you to kindly read about them and learn to distinguish them. So in summary, the activity schedule planning process involves activity identification, activity definition, activity breakdown, activity sequencing, and activity estimation. Now, activity scheduling is hopefully the most important activity in project schedule planning. There is need for an activity schedule plan. This activity schedule plan indicates all the activities that are required to be accomplished in our project. In addition, we need to estimate the costs for resources. Remember, resources may be human resources and other resources that we are going to use in our project. And the cost for each activity has to be estimated. So we estimate the costs for resources. We also estimate the costs for each activity. There is therefore a need for a cost schedule plan. In addition to cost estimation, we must also estimate the time duration for each activity, the time duration for each task. So this results into a project time schedule plan. So in activity scheduling, we must basically have an activity schedule plan in cost estimation and estimating resources for the project and the costs for each activity in the project. We must come up with what we call a cost schedule plan, and in estimating the time duration for each activity and task within our project, we must come up with a time schedule plan. Now, after we have planned our project schedule, the project manager must now develop the project schedule from project schedule planning to project schedule development. We can now use our project management software to develop the project schedule. Now, in developing the project schedule, there are a number of things that we must do. We must design a work breakdown structure. We must design a network diagram. We must design the associated Gantt chart, and we must carry out what we call network analysis. Now, as far as designing the work breakdown structure is concerned, it is this work breakdown structure, or WBS, that will show all the activities to be done to complete a project. Now, a document will be presented, and it will be called a WBS, a work breakdown structure, and this document will indicate all the tasks that are to be done within the project, with assigning various team members, with assigning various project team members to each one of these tasks. Now, we list all the deliverables within our project in the work breakdown structure, and each deliverable has a deadline. Now, we use again our software to assign tasks, and we also use the software to assist us to prioritize these tasks. Now, the software also helps us to track the project progress and the progress of each task that we are working on within our project, so we avoid any bottlenecks. The software assists us to track the project progress, and when we are tracking the project progress, we avoid any bottlenecks that may arise. Now, a work breakdown structure organizes the tasks in a way that we can track the progress of each task. Now, after we are satisfied with our work breakdown structure, then we can as well also look at designing the network diagram. The network diagram assists us to determine the project duration. In determining the project duration, we are determining the longest series of activities that will determine the project duration. We therefore determine what we call the critical path. The critical path is the longest path through a project, and activities on the critical path must be done at all costs. They are a must-do, and these activities on the critical path do not have what we call a float. They do not have what we call a slack. So I want you to read about the meaning of float, the meaning of slack. Now, these two terminologies almost mean the same thing. I want you to read about them and come to understand them better. Now, activities on the critical path are the so-called bottleneck activities. As I've said, these activities must be done at all costs, and they must not delay at any cost. So make sure that after you have identified the critical activities on your network diagram, they should not be delayed at all costs. Why? They have no slack, they have no float. Now, after we have finished going through our network diagram, we again have to design the associated Gantt chart. The Gantt chart was an invention by Henry Gantt, who was interested in the order of operations. Now, if you remember Henry Gantt, who was an associate of Winslow Taylor in our management science course, these two were interested in how best to perform an activity, how best to perform a task. So what Henry Gantt did was to develop what we call a Gantt chart, and today we talk about what we call Gantt chart diagrams. These Gantt chart diagrams are a powerful analytical tool which is used by very many managers, including project managers. So Microsoft project software can be used to develop this Gantt chart, and today there is an improvement to these Gantt charts courtesy of this software, because within the Gantt chart we have developed what we call task bars, or you can call them Gantt bars. You can also show the milestone markers on your Gantt chart, and you can also show the link lines. These link lines help us to link various tasks together. Remember, we talked about what we call task dependencies: start to finish, finish to start, and so on. Now, Taylor and Gantt have greatly contributed to operations management by their ideas. They have therefore helped project management to become a distinct business function as we have it today. Now, after you have designed your Gantt chart, what's important now is also to carry out what we call network analysis. As you know, the network diagram is a tool that helps us to determine the project duration. It helps us to determine the longest path in our project. It helps us to identify the critical activities in our project, and these critical activities should not run behind schedule. No, because the critical activities in any project are a must-do, and the activity connections in the network diagram indicate where the critical activities are, and these activity connections indicate the sequential relationships between these activities that we are supposed to undertake in our project. Now, we have two types of activity network diagrams. One type is known as activity on node diagram. The other is known as activity on arrow diagram. I want you to read about these two types of activities or these two types of network diagrams. the activity on node network diagram and the activity on arrow network diagram. Now, in network analysis, we have to understand various terminologies. So some of these include, for example, an event. What is an event? An event is a point in time at the start or at the completion of one or more activities in our project. There are terms like critical path. What is a critical path? A critical path is a series of activities that must be done without fail, without any delay, and they determine the longest path through a project and must not run behind the schedule. So this is what we call a critical path, and the activities there are the critical activities. Now, another terminology, EET, standing for earliest event time. Earliest event time is the time by which an activity leading into an event can be started. That's what we mean by EET, earliest event time. Then there is also what we call LST, latest time an activity can begin, latest start time. So LST stands for latest start time, which is the latest time an activity can begin. And there is also what we call EST. EST stands for earliest start time, and this is the earliest time an activity can begin. I want you to study these terminologies and become familiar with them. These are terminologies that relate to network analysis, which is a very important activity that the project manager must do when we are developing a project schedule. Network analysis, therefore, helps the project manager to predict the project duration. So we basically talk of critical path analysis. In network analysis or critical path analysis, we need to understand other concepts apart from concepts like EET, earliest event time, LST and EST. There is also what we call crashing. Crashing means compressing the project schedule by trading off the cost and time. So there is a cost and time trade-off. I want you to read about these concepts. There is what we call fast tracking, which involves reducing the project duration, but it increases the project's risks. That's the disadvantage. There is what we call a backward pass. There is a forward pass. There is slack and float. That's one I've already talked about. Milestones, indications to deliverables, and deliverables. All these are terminologies that we must understand when we are handling what we call network analysis, or you can call it critical path analysis. Within network analysis, we also have to do what we call critical path analysis. Now, after developing your schedule, you must make sure that you cross-check the following to see whether everything you need to be in your schedule is included. You need to cross-check to see whether all resources to complete the project are there. These could be financial resources, they could be human resources, and other resources. Ensure that they are included in your schedule that you have developed. You need to ensure that the time frames in which work should be completed are all clearly documented in your schedule that you have developed. You ensure that there is all the work that needs to be associated with your project is included in your schedule that you have developed. There must be also in your schedule what we call a schedule control mechanism. There must be a schedule control mechanism. And the schedule control basically refers to managing changes to a project schedule. That schedule control mechanism guides the project manager in managing changes to the project. So it is the schedule control mechanism that guides us to manage all the changes that we may need to make on our project. It guides us in managing those changes. So I want you to read about the schedule control mechanism from authoritative sources and improve your knowledge about what we mean by a schedule control mechanism. This mechanism outlines the procedures that need to be followed when there is any desirable change that we may need in our project. It could be change in scope or otherwise. So any changes that we may desire to make in our project, we follow that schedule control mechanism. We should also know which paperwork we need to do in order to effect the changes that we may need to effect in our project. We need to know who is authorized to approve any changes to the project scope or any other changes. We need to remember that as project managers, we shall be evaluated by the projects that we deliver. Remember, you may be undertaking, for example, this is just not part of the information system project, but all of us at the end of our study, we shall be required to undertake a research project. Now, if you undertake that research project, you are always evaluated by what you deliver in the time that has been allocated. So the same story here, that control mechanism is included in our schedule, and it is the one that guides us on how we are supposed to make changes to our, even when you are undertaking your research study, sometimes you say, let me change my topic, let me change this, let's change that. There, you may not have a control mechanism, but here, any changes that you intend to make, there must be a control mechanism that will guide you to make changes to your project. Now, some projects are time-bound, that one we know. So you'll be evaluated by the quality of the system, of the information system that you have delivered in the given time, in that fixed time that you are given by the project owner or by the project sponsor. Now, some projects are cost-bound. You'll be evaluated by the quality of the system that you are able to deliver within fixed budget that you have been assigned. So basically, schedule development is one of the most important activities that project managers have to undertake. Let us now look at the output or the outcome of schedule development. Now, the outcome of schedule development is basically the activity schedule plan. The activity schedule plan is the expected outcome of schedule development. And this is what we know as the baseline schedule of activities with the start dates and end dates, and this is also sometimes known as the project schedule, the project schedule of activities. And the activity schedule is what a project manager is expected to develop, and the other outcome expected is the activity network diagram. It is this activity network diagram that normally helps the project manager, as well as helping the stakeholders, to view the various relationships between different tasks, the relationships between different activities, and shows the duration of each activity, the duration of each task within the project. Now, it also presents the critical tasks, the critical activities that are supposed to be performed. It also may focus on various problem areas within our project. Now, another outcome, very important, is the activity Gantt chart. The activity Gantt chart, when we use our software, is represents the different so-called Gantt bars. These Gantt bars denote the beginning of the activity and the end of the activity. There is a timeline for each activity, which is well presented by the Gantt chart. So these are some of the outcomes of schedule development. It's important to note that all these must be presented by the project manager and explained to the project sponsors and sometimes to the rest of the project stakeholders. Other important project plan documents include some of the following: the communication management plan, the cost management plan, the human resource management plan, the procurement management plan, the quality management plan, the risk management plan, the scope management plan, and the time management plan. These plans will be discussed briefly in the subsequent slides. A communication management plan is also important. We need to adhere to the communication plan throughout the project execution. Communication management is based on that plan. This plan is out to ensure that our project remains on track. The plan also ensures effective guidance of all parts of the project. This includes guiding the communication part itself, and particulars within this communication plan should include, for example, the frequency of communication and the methods of communication. Now, communication management involves processes that ensure timely communication of project information to whomever we are communicating. It is argued that about 90% of the project manager's time may be spent on communicating with project stakeholders. Communication planning, therefore, is part of the communication management process, which includes, of course, communication planning, then information distribution and dissemination, as well as performance reporting, in addition to administrative closure. Now, in this slide, our main interest is in communication planning. We need to determine the stakeholders who will need the information. We need to determine how often that information will be needed by them. We may make use of various templates to develop our communication management plan. So I want you to go to the internet and find out various templates there which you can use to develop your communication management plan. More on project communication management will be considered and handled in our topic number 5 when we are dealing with the various project management areas of knowledge. Project cost management is another important area that we study in the areas of knowledge. It is one of the most important areas of knowledge in project management. Now, we need to develop a project cost management plan. The cost management plan helps us to strategize the planning of the project's budget. The project may need to be completed within the approved time. The project may desire to be completed within the approved budget. So a cost management plan is therefore very necessary. And this plan must look at things like resource planning. These are the resources of the project, need to be well planned. Resources may include work resources, they may include material resources, and they may include cost resources. I want you to study about these 3 types of resources as we know them in project management and get the differences properly. Now, cost management planning also includes what we call cost budgeting. We look at the types of cost estimation, which include binary estimation technique, rough order magnitude estimation technique, and definitive estimation techniques. These are the techniques that we use when we are budgeting our costs. So you also need to study these various techniques and study them and improve your understanding of them. Now, we need to plan in advance. How shall the costs be managed? How the costs shall be estimated? How we shall allocate cost estimates to individual work items. This is what we call cost budgeting. How changes to the project budget shall be handled. This one we call it cost control, and we shall look at it shortly. Now, the cost management plan document should also refer to the ground rules. It should refer to the work breakdown structure as well. It should refer to the assumptions that we've made. Now, all these are used as a basis for estimating our costs. It's very important to have your project cost management plan in the document that you submit to management for approval. So the project plan document must also contain what we call a project cost management plan. In the cost management plan, we also need to show in advance how costs shall be controlled. Cost control involves changes to the project budget. Cost control is basically based on the cost baseline budget. There are various techniques that we may use in cost control, one of them known as the earned value analysis technique. With this technique, it is possible to compare a project's baseline costs with the project's actual costs. So the cost management plan acts as an input to cost control. More on project cost management will be handled in our topic number 5 when we are looking at the various project management areas of knowledge. In project planning, we also need to clarify how the human resources will be managed. So we come up with what we call a human resource management plan. The plan should show how the ideal project team members shall be acquired. If you remember your management science course, there is a process that we follow to manage human resources. Now, in the project plan, we should show how the ideal project team members shall be acquired. We should also show how the project team members, after we have acquired them, how we shall develop them, how we shall train them, and so on and so forth. The plan should also show how the project team members shall be effectively deployed in various areas within the project where they are supposed to work. This project human resource management plan should also indicate how we intend to appraise the performance of the project team members. So performance appraisal should also be indicated in the human resource management plan for our project. Now, within this plan, we should also indicate how the project team members shall be remunerated, how the project team members shall be rewarded. And also, you can as well indicate how various conflicts shall be handled within the project. More on project human resource management will be looked at when we are handling our topic number 5, which relates to the project management areas of knowledge. A project procurement management plan is one of the most important documents that the project manager must develop during project planning. For your information, the procurement management process has various issues that we must consider. We must consider solicitation. We must consider things like contract administration. Now, procurement planning involves some of the following activities. In procurement planning, we scope everything to be procured in relation to the project. We determine what needs to be bought for the project to run smoothly, and we basically think about the process that we shall go through to procure these products and the services which we shall get from outside the project organization. So there is need for support from procurement specialists when we are developing the procurement management plan, so that they give us ideas, they give us their expert opinion, and we include it in the procurement management plan. Now, the scope statement must be based on when we are developing our procurement management plan. We should also base on the prevailing market conditions, which all serve as inputs to our procurement planning. Now, the expected output is basically the procurement management plan and surely a statement of work. Now, the procurement management plan should describe the type of contracts that we intend to sign with the various vendors, and we should also identify and clarify whether standard procurement documents will be needed in our project, and we should also know how procurement shall be coordinated between the various project departments and sections, and so on. Now, more on project procurement management shall be handled in our topic number 5, which looks at the project management areas of knowledge. Here, let us now look at the project quality management plan. The project manager during project planning must develop a quality management plan, and in this plan the project manager has to decide and determine the quality assurance activities that must be undertaken, which may include design reviews, which may include prototype inspections. And in developing the project quality management plan, there is need to decide and determine the quality control actions that need to be undertaken. These may include system inspections, they may include running acceptance tests. We also need to determine the quality control techniques that we may apply during the project implementation, and these may include using Ishikawa diagrams, using causal loop diagrams as we study about them in our system dynamics, and then also using simulation experiments. All these we shall look at in detail when we are looking at topic number 5, which considers the various project management areas of knowledge, project quality management being one of them. Now let us look at project risk management or project risk management planning. Now this one will generate what we call a project risk management plan. Now, risk management is the art and science of monitoring, of identifying, assessing, and responding to various project risks. Therefore, we need to come up with a risk management plan. This risk management plan should indicate the risk management tasks and activities that are required to be performed. We need to know who will be responsible for the various risks that may face the project, and risk management planning is the first step in project risk management or in the project risk management process. We plan how the risks will be monitored. We plan how the risks will be identified. After identifying each risk, we analyze it. We also plan how the risks will be analyzed, and we also come up with a risk treatment plan, how the risks that we have analyzed shall be treated in our project. Now, we also need to come up with a budget for risk management. We also need to know who will be responsible for handling the various risks that may face the project. Therefore, we need to have somebody called a risk owner. The risk owner is basically the person who handles the various risks. We need to estimate the likely risks that may face our project or that we may encounter as we are implementing our project. We need to know who will be in charge of those risks. That's the person we've called the risk owner, because now when various risks are identified, we need to know who will be in charge to administer treatment, administer the appropriate treatment to any of the risks that may crop up and that may face our project. More on project risk management will be handled in our topic number 5 when we are looking at the various project management areas of knowledge. Now let us look at the project scope management plan. This plan is the one that communicates the project scope to the various project stakeholders. Now, the scope of work is the sum total of all the works, the products and features in a given project. So, scope planning or a scope management plan, when we are developing it, we follow a particular process. This process may begin with collecting requirements, the so-called requirements collection and scoping. The stakeholder requirements are collected, the stakeholder expectations are collected, we look at the required budget, we consider the required deliverables, we also use various techniques to collect requirements from various stakeholders. These techniques may include interview, we may conduct a survey, we may use focus group discussions, and other methods to collect requirements. Now, after we have collected the requirements, we again need to define the project scope. This is what we normally know as scope definition. Now, in scope definition, this is where the requirements that we have collected are converted into detailed descriptions of the service that we need to produce as outcome of our project, of the information system, in this case, that is the output of our project, which is the objective of our project. Now, in addition to that, we need to break down the various activities. In other words, we create a work breakdown structure. A work breakdown structure is a document that breaks down all work to its minute level or to its atomic level. The scope of work of a project is normally organized in what we call a work breakdown structure, or you can abbreviate it as a WBS. The WBS has all the activities that need to be done to complete the project. It is a tool that describes the planned outcomes of the project. It shows all the various activities that need to be performed in the project. So a WBS is a very important, let me call it a tool that presents all the work that needs to be done in a project. Now, the next thing that we can do is to possibly scope the high-level risks that were likely to be faced by the project. A risk is a possibility of a loss or injury. That's how you can explain a risk. A risk is that possibility whether there will be a loss when we are implementing our project, or our project may be injured by this or that. So scoping the high-level risks is also important. The other thing that we need to do is to plan the scope change control. Scope change control also needs to be planned. In other words, we develop a scope change control system that the project manager will follow when we are implementing the project. And we also need to verify and validate the scope that we have developed and agree on our scope management plan. More on project scope management will be looked at in topic number 5 when we are looking at the project management areas of knowledge in detail. Project time management is a very important knowledge area. We shall look at it when we go to our topic number 5. But here we are basically so much interested in project time management planning. Now, this involves planning and analyzing a project timeline. Time management deals with managing the time that we spend on a project. The project manager has to plan how that time will be managed. The project manager needs to plan the time management tools that we shall apply and the techniques that we shall use. So we need to plan the time management strategies in general. Now, the time management plan is based on the project schedule. It is also based on the activities that we have defined in our activity schedule. It is also based on the duration of each one of these tasks, that is to say the estimated duration of each one of the tasks that we intend to do in our project. So there is need to plan for strategies that the project manager shall use to manage the time. We need to plan for techniques we shall use to manage our time, and one of the techniques is the so-called prioritization technique. In the prioritization technique, we create a task list of important activities to be done. So we come up with a task list of tasks to be done in their order of priority, and then we note the most important tasks to be accomplished on a given day, on each and every day that comes, and then each day we make sure that we work on each task until it is completed. We then carry over remaining tasks to the next day, but we make sure that we carry over only those tasks that have what we call a float or that have a slack. We do not carry over tasks which we know are critical. Critical tasks must be completed on the time they are scheduled for completion. Now, delegation is another strategy that project managers sometimes use, and this could be included in the time management plan. We may include in our plan an aspect of delegation where we may probably not be able to do all the work alone. Surely being a good project manager doesn't imply that you do all the work alone, so you must know how to delegate some work as long as this work is completed within the scheduled time. We need also to plan to apply appropriate tools. time management tools, like there is what they call time tracker. Remember, every aspect of the project takes time, so we need to track the time we spend on each task. Sometimes you may use what we call Kanban boards. Each task in a Kanban board is represented by a card, and on this card they write information describing the task which is supposed to be done and the person who is assigned to that task, and so on and so on and so forth. So everyone in the project team can see what each one is supposed to do and in which time. So these are some of the techniques and strategies that we may use to manage time. More on project time management will be considered in our topic number 5 when we are looking at the project management areas of knowledge.